with 9 in the most recent reporting week, mostly in northern BC. Now, infectious disease specialists say that this is a wake-up call and are worried that this could damage Canada's public health reputation. And one specialist weighed in on why he thinks this is happening.
Reasons for that we need to investigate, whether it's lack of timely availability of vaccine, whether it's people not receiving the right message, whether it's some decisions that people are making, and we need to have conversations with individuals and groups about that, but it needs to be addressed.
Now, the Public Health Agency says Canada can reestablish its measles elimination status once transmission of the strain associated with the current outbreak is interrupted for at least 12 months. Now, it says the measles vaccine is still the best way to protect against the virus. And search and rescue crews say that they have made the difficult decision to stand down on the search for a 65-year-old that went missing on Burke Mountain in Coquitlam last week. Tosang Alfred Wong has been missing since Tuesday. His car found by police at the trailhead of the Coquitlam Lake Trail the day after. And now Coquitlam Search and Rescue says nothing was found despite extensive search efforts, and crews ended the search yesterday evening. And a humpback whale has been found dead near Lasqueti Island. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans confirmed the adult whale was found on Friday. Now, the whale, known as Polyphemus, was first spotted in 2004 and is known to migrate between Hawaii and BC. Now, it's unclear what led to its death, but the DFO calls it an unfortunate incident that they continue to investigate. And now to the Okanagan, where avian flu has been detected at an animal sanctuary there. Critter Aid in Summerland cares for dozens of rescued animals, including chickens and ducks, although it's not clear and hasn't been indicated what kind of animal tested positive for the flu. Now, this is one of 8 cases of avian flu detected in BC since November. And South Asian communities in the Lower Mainland, particularly in Surrey, have been hit with a wave of extortion-related threats and violence. And to try to stop it, Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke has requested 150 extra police officers to deal with the situation, while the province have put together a task force to target extortion threats. But one local broadcaster whose radio station was targeted by one of these incidents says this is a good start, but more needs to be done.
People definitely want justice, but they want justice. They want to see the justice happening as well. So probably the government and the system and the police, they need to do more to boost people's confidence, because people are frightened, scared.
Now, we will be holding a community town hall in Surrey on this extortion crisis, and we want to hear from you. So join us Thursday, November 13th at 6:30 p.m. at the Surrey Arts Centre in Bear Creek Park, and tune in anywhere you find CBC. And that's it for me. You're watching CBC News BC. I'm Jessica Chung. Don't go anywhere, because BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Surrey's mayor has called for 150 more police officers as her city deals with a wave of extortion-related threats and violence. How far will more enforcement go in stopping these cases? We'll talk to the Surrey Police Service, and then we'll take your calls. Plus, the COP30 climate summit begins today in Brazil. But as the world's economies deal with Donald Trump's tariffs, are climate initiatives falling by the wayside? We'll take your calls after 12:30. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. This Thursday, CBC is holding a town hall to discuss the wave of extortion threats that have gripped communities in Surrey and other parts of the Fraser Valley. They can involve demands for cash, usually from a business, and often end with gunshots fired at homes and storefronts. Police say there have been more than 100 suspected cases in 2025 alone, and that these crimes especially target the South Asian business community. Now, Surrey Mayor Brenda Locke has requested 150 extra police officers to deal with the situation. Police have tied extortion to shots fired at the Swift Radio 1200 AM broadcast station last September. One of his radio hosts, Jasmine Romana, spoke with the Early Edition and Stephen Quinn this morning about how these threats come about in the community.
And were people told to pay a certain amount of money or else, or how did it work?
Well, you can see a pattern there. As far as my understanding is that they start getting calls that pay us money. And money varies from $100,000 to $2 million or maybe more, depends on the individual they are calling.
Wow.
And who are they? Nobody knows. And then calls, they keep coming. And if the individual is not cooperative, then they start shooting on the businesses. And my personal understanding is that they don't mean to kill. Their basic purpose to begin with is to scare people, and they shoot when they make sure that nobody gets injured. And eventually, the pattern tells me that the third phase of it is they start shooting. They don't care if somebody gets injured or killed.
As I mentioned, CBC is holding a town hall event this week about extortion. You can join us in Surrey for a conversation about the extortion crisis that is affecting the South Asian community in the Lower Mainland. We're going to hear from police, politicians, and community leaders about what's happening. We'll talk about how this is affecting people and discuss solutions being put forward. That will happen this Thursday, November 13th at 6:30 p.m. We'll be at the Surrey Arts Centre in Bear Creek Park. If you'd like to attend, you can go to cbc.ca/BC and click the link in the CBC in your community section. And you can tune in anywhere you find CBC. Well, this past Saturday morning, police officers did respond to a shooting that caused damage to the exterior of a home in the 17,000 block of 32nd Avenue in Surrey. The RCMP Surrey Provincial Operations Support Unit confirmed the damage was caused by gunshots. Surrey Police Service says investigators have not confirmed the incident as an extortion, despite it having some earmarks of that crime. We're asking you, how concerned are you about these extortion threats, and how far do you think more policing can go to take on extortion? You can give us a call now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can email bctoday@cbc.ca. We're also watching your comments on our TikTok Live. I'll be joined by CBC reporter John Hernandez, who has been tracking these cases and looking into this issue in just a few minutes. Right now, I'm joined by Ian MacDonald, spokesperson for the Surrey Police Service. Good afternoon. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting.
What can you tell us, first of all, about this shooting that took place on Saturday?
Yeah, I have a couple of updates. It was actually me that issued the statement saying that it had the earmarks of extortion but had not yet been classified as such. I've talked to investigators, and it now has been deemed an extortion. So not only the earmarks, it's confirmed as an extortion incident. Also, people might be aware that there was a worker working on the exterior of that home that was injured. And we're not sure if it was a result of debris or whether it was a result of a bullet fragment. But nonetheless, a male was injured on scene, transported to hospital. I'm happy to report that he remained in good spirits, is in stable condition, and is being treated for non-life-threatening injuries.
Okay, that is good to know that that he is being treated, that person is being treated. How many cases of extortion does that make this now in Surrey?
So we've had 94 extortion incidents, and of that, 43 had related shots fired.
Okay. We covered the Caps Cafe shooting back in October, and at that time, there were 65 related, extortion-related cases. So that's just an increase over the last month. Why do you think these cases keep escalating, despite all the efforts, all the announcements when it comes to the task force, to a phone number, to additional resources? Why do you think these cases keep escalating?
Well, I think part of the answer is in what you just offered. The fact that there is an extortion tip line, the fact that there has been Crime Stoppers advertisements encouraging people to come forward, as well as engagement by SPS officers with over 1,000 businesses in Surrey.
So you're saying it was underreported before?
Well, what I'm saying is I think it's a combined result. Part of it is the fact that there were people that were reluctant to come forward, and there's strength in numbers. And so as more people come forward, good, bad, or otherwise, as there is more reporting about the incidents taking place, people are coming forward. The other thing, and you used Caps Cafe as an example, and so I'll reference that, we do have incidents where extortion attempts are repeated. So we don't necessarily have unique victims, but we have people, once they feel that that conduit of connection to police to report, that if they report once, they feel a lot more comfort in continuing that reporting and updating police on what's transpiring and what engagement they've had or continuing engagement they've had with the extortionists.
Okay, because Caps Cafe was shot at 3 times, yeah.
Correct. And so I don't want to downplay the fact that this is troubling, that the numbers are increasing, but I do want to emphasize that we do want that reporting. And some of it is as a result of the same complainant victim reporting on numerous occasions. And I think you alluded to it. In some cases, we have people that might not have taken the matter as seriously, maybe even received some text messages or contacts back in 2024, but as a result of what's now transpired in 2025, are more inclined to report, and we welcome them coming forward.
So why do you think Mayor Brenda Locke is calling for 150 more police officers to deal with this then? What difference would that make?
Well, I think we need to break down the request, and so I don't want to put words in the mayor's mouth. I know that she wants the best for Surrey, and obviously at a time when we see these extortion numbers and the impact on families and businesses, she wants it to end, as we all do. But really the request, if you think about it in terms of the law enforcement resourcing, it isn't just the Surrey Police Service working alone. We're not working in a silo. We're collaborating not only with other jurisdictions in the Lower Mainland and with that provincial task force, but also with federal policing units. And so when you're talking about bolstering law enforcement, I believe the mayor's request is for all of that to be bolstered. And so you start talking about federal policing units that might be angled or targeting organized crime. You're talking about financial investigative policing units. You're talking about a lot of different things that can impact what we know is a multi-jurisdictional and has indications of some international crime involvement. And so to resource that properly, I believe the mayor is advocating that all of those levels of law enforcement from the federal, provincial, and municipal level to be bolstered.
Okay, so that 150 number, if I'm hearing you right, that would not just be for Surrey Police Service?
I don't believe that is the mayor's intention at all. You can get clarification from her, but certainly the reference that I saw to when she made that comment was how a lot of those resources would be actually RCMP controlled. And so through federal policing units, through CFSCU, through E-Division, we're not talking about taking 150 uniformed officers and just placing them throughout the city. We're talking about taking experienced, knowledgeable officers who are familiar with international crime, familiar with organized crime, and familiar with financial crime, working at all different levels and connecting with each other.
Okay. Just a couple more questions for you. We've also heard about 3 people who have been deported in relation to extortion investigations. How do those concur or compete with criminal investigations here? Can you take me through that a little bit?
Yeah, well, CBSA is one of the partners that's working on the Provincial Extortion Task Force. And so that interconnectivity and the combining of efforts is probably best exemplified by that. And I want to say that I understand the frustration in the community. I understand that anytime you have brazen events like these shootings, you want it to stop. But you have to realize that from a law enforcement standpoint, we have to gather evidence. And whether that's CBSA, whether that is detective units working at SPS or part of the provincial task force, we have to coordinate our efforts to make sure that we're not trampling on any other investigations. And where we can, find the interconnectivity and find the common purpose. And so I think that CBSA announcement on Friday is an excellent example. There's not very many people that would have known that CBSA and the task force had identified 80+ individuals as persons of interest. But as soon as the deportations were announced, they were also able to say there's another 78 individuals that are on their radar.
What would that mean for any charges here?
Yeah, so that's my point, is that despite the number of charges that may have to this point met with charge approval, people need to know and hopefully feel some assurance from the fact that you have multi-levels of law enforcement, coordinated law enforcement, working on intricate but often interconnected investigations. And so much like CBSA demonstrated on Friday, I would argue that you're going to see similar examples of that start to roll out from the provincial task force as well as from the individual departments in the Lower Mainland. You will see more charges, you will start to see that interconnectivity, and you will see all of those agencies working together to deal with the problem, whether that means arrest and charge here, or in the case of CBSA, Immigration and Deportation Act enforcement.
Okay, and lastly, there are videos that make their rounds on social media. There's one that purports to be from Saturday's shooting. We have not verified these videos, but they do make it out into the community. What attempts are being made to verify these, to find out who is shooting them or who is filming these supposed shootings?
Yeah, so obviously anything that is posted online we have awareness of, but as you alluded to, we need to corroborate it. So part of our investigative team is tasked with that. And what I want to say is, I know that the Swift Radio person that was on a little bit earlier was talking about how there's almost a template. And what we've seen quite commonly in many of these, especially the shootings, is that a video will be released. Regrettably, you might have multiple parties claiming responsibility. And so that's where it becomes the task of law enforcement to verify the video is legitimate and then to properly source who is responsible as well as who's disseminating the video.
Ian MacDonald, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's Ian MacDonald, spokesperson for the Surrey Police Service. We're taking your calls on this. How concerned are you about these ongoing extortion threats? And how far do you think added police resources can go to take on these cases and stopping them? You can call us. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. That's 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Joining me now is CBC News reporter John Hernandez, who has been investigating these cases in the Lower Mainland. And John's with me in studio. Hello.
Hey, Michelle.
Thanks for joining us. You've published a timeline on these cases of extortion, and they go beyond BC, right, and other provinces as well. Can you take us through some of the main events?
Yes, absolutely. So if you look at this, it kind of starts its way east before making its way to BC. So you go all the way back to October 2023. That's when police in Edmonton started noticing a series of violent extortions and drive-by shootings. Police at the time said extortionists were targeting developers. These developers would receive threats over apps like WhatsApp, and then they were threatened to pay money or else their show homes would be burned. And so there were a series of fires related to these incidents. About a month later, police began noticing similar patterns in BC, although not tied to developers this time around. One of the earliest incidents we see reported here in BC happened at the Payal Business Center in Surrey. So if you've been there, it's just a big business complex, lots of shops, jewelers, butchers, garment stores.
So busy.
Very busy, very busy. Police did report a shooting there overnight, November 23rd, 2023. And then just a few hours later, police sent out a public notice warning business owners of possible extortion incidents. They said that they had become aware that businesses were being extorted allegedly and not coming forward to police. So this sort of incited a call to action from the Surrey RCMP, which was in jurisdiction at the time. Now, fast forward again, just a few weeks later, officers in Toronto began noticing extortion-related incidents, a similar pattern targeting South Asian businesses. So that's when this really became sort of a nationwide problem, hence the involvement of the federal RCMP. So then some more noteworthy shootings happened. September 2024, that's when Punjabi singer A.P. Dillon's home was shot at in Victoria. The alleged suspects posted videos of that online, and members from the Bishnoi gang in India claimed responsibility for the shooting. So that's sort of when we started to see that pattern take shape. A month later, the federal RCMP commissioner, Michael Duhaime, said Mounties had evidence that the highest levels of the Indian government were involved in orchestrating a campaign of violence, that's what they said, on Canadian soil, including murder, extortion, and intimidation. So a pretty substantial claim from police at the time. So now let's take a little fast forward to June of this year. That's when police here in BC say they began noticing a pretty substantial uptick in these extortion-related crimes. That included 3 shootings at Caps Cafe, as you mentioned. In September, that's when we had the official announcement that a task force here in BC would get involved. Since then, we've seen 7 charges laid in relation to these different cases. And, you know, for context, it might seem like a bit of a drop in the bucket. We just heard from Ian saying 94 extortion incidents in Surrey this year. And it's interesting because on Friday, I got an updated number then, and they had just said 81 extortion cases had happened in Surrey. So do the math, just over 3 days, 13 extortion-related incidents announced here in Surrey.
And part of what he said in response to that question was that there are avenues now for people to report these. So that may be part of that increase. It is interesting to see how the numbers have been going up. You've been engaged with residents and business owners in Surrey. I mean, what are they telling you?
Yeah. So, I mean, we were quite interested in doing some of this ongoing coverage to look at where this sort of began in BC. So me and our colleague Saurabh Sabadoo, who's also been covering this extensively, we took a trip to the Payal Business Center in Surrey, that business complex I had mentioned, just to get a sense, take the temperature there, hear what business owners are saying. And, you know, we went door to door, we spoke with different jewelers, and interestingly, nobody wanted to say anything publicly. The message we got from business owners there was that even just by speaking out about this as an issue puts me at risk. People were concerned. They don't want to draw attention to themselves, their dealings, because they're worried that they could be targeted next. But anecdotally, what we did hear from them, some business owners in that complex have closed up shop and moved elsewhere, in some cases out of the country altogether. We've also heard issues of victims, rather than going forward, just deciding that they're going to pay and they'll play ball with these extortionists rather than deal with any more trouble. Now, that runs counter to what we've heard from police, who have been urging people not to pay. I did ask, SBS Police Chief Norm Lipinski about this. Again, he said he had heard anecdotally that people have paid, but police haven't qualified that statement yet. But again, the messaging there.
John Hernandez is with me, CBC News reporter, who has been investigating the wave of extortion-related threats and violence in Surrey ahead of a town hall that CBC is hosting this Thursday. We've been taking your calls on this too, and Mark is calling us now from Surrey. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
Hi, and tell us how you're feeling as a Surrey resident.
Okay, I'm wondering why the SPS dropped the ball on the shooting of the Caps coffee shop. After it was shot at twice, on the third time, they should have been live police officer watching the street to block the getaway car and therefore arrest the extortionist.
Interesting point, Mark. Thank you very much. As we mentioned, Caps Cafe was targeted 3 times. And so Mark making the point there that perhaps why not put those resources to be more vigilant and to surveilling locations that have been targeted before. Thank you very much for your question there. I have about a minute left here. John Hernandez is with me. We touched on the international part of this as well, which is why there needs to be so much coordination. But what can you tell us about the origins and the role that we know of international crimes here, international gangs here?
Yeah, well, I mean, just, this group claiming, the Bishnoi gang claiming to be involved, obviously, and connecting this issue to what the RCMP are calling Indian agents of the government, obviously creates a massive issue that now the RCMP has to tackle. One thing, I did speak with, Constable Duncan Pound, a chief superintendent with the BC RCMP. He said that the amount of evidence required to connect these alleged perpetrators overseas and then have the RCMP potentially go there to execute justice, essentially, is very difficult. It's a lot.
It's certainly a big job. I'll ask you another question to wrap in a moment, John, but we're going to go to an ad break for our TV audience. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes from now. And so what are our experts saying that needs to be done?
Yeah, they say the number one issue, or the one thing that needs to be done is for policing to communicate and have a dialogue with the community members. Because as Ian had mentioned, in order to get a full picture of what's happening, you need people to report the crimes. In order to tackle this as an issue, you need to have a comprehensive view of how many incidents are taking place. So experts like a criminologist from UFE told me, building a dialogue with the community and having them relay that information as it comes is crucial to understanding the magnitude of the incident and then acting accordingly.
Thank you very much for your work, and your piece is up now on our website, cbc.ca/BC. John Hernandez, thanks for the time.
Thanks.
That's CBC reporter John Hernandez. And yes, you can go to our website for his piece that outlines the timeline of the extortion-related threats that have been occurring in the Fraser Valley, cbc.ca/BC. And again, on Thursday, CBC BC is organizing a town hall event. It's called Extortion, Communities in Fear. And this is where community members can share their concerns on the topic. The event is this Thursday, again, November 13th, from 6:30 to 8 p.m. at the Surrey Art Centre. And we will also broadcast it live on all our media platforms. The guests will include police, politicians, and community leaders. And again, members of the public are invited. You can go to our website to sign up. That's cbc.ca/BC. 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks very much for being with us. And coming up in our next half hour, we're going to talk about the COP30 climate summit that started today in Brazil. And we'll ask you what priorities are being placed right now on climate initiatives. Are they falling by the wayside? We'll take your calls along with UBC political scientist Kathryn Harrison. She'll be my guest. That's coming up after this CBC News Update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. The RCMP in Kelowna are investigating after a Canadian Food Inspection Agency office was vandalized yesterday. Photos online show what appears to be eggs and fecal matter smeared on the front door and windows of the agency's office. Last Thursday, the CFIA oversaw the cull of roughly 300 ostriches at a farm in Edgewood. As we've been hearing on the show, police in Surrey now say a weekend shooting is connected to an extortion attempt. Several shots were fired at a home along 168th Street on Saturday. Investigators say a man working on the home suffered non-life-threatening injuries after he was hit by debris or bullet fragments. No arrests have been made. And daily high temperature records have fallen in 8 communities across BC after the weekend weather system brought some heavy rain. Environment Canada says a record dating back to 1917 fell in Prince George when the temperature reached 14.3 degrees yesterday. Records also fell in places such as Bella Bella, Dease Lake, the Sunshine Coast, and parts of Metro Vancouver. And now taking a look at the forecast on the North Coast. Rain this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 8. Highs around 7 with a mix of sun and cloud in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a chance of showers with a high of 7 as well. Highs around 9 with a few showers and some sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 12. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, some sunshine this afternoon, windy in some areas with highs around 15. That's your CBC News Update from Vancouver.
Rob, thank you very much. That's Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today, and we're going to bring you some news from the Okanagan now. 2 years after dismal fruit crops and tricky economic conditions caused its collapse, BC Treat Fruits is back. And CBC reporter Tiffany Goodwin explains that the organization has been reinvented.
It's the sound of a new era at BC Treat Fruits as thousands of fresh apples make their way through the assembly line. BC Treat Fruits has been packaging and selling fruit for 90 years, and after nearly dissolving in 2024, it's back after being purchased by Wildstone Construction for $23 million. Rather than a co-op, it'll be run as a for-profit packing and distribution hub available to growers across the region. Lana Popham, BC's Minister of Agriculture and Food, says the reopening of the high-tech plant is welcome news after back-to-back years of challenging conditions for Okanagan fruit growers.
It's just an incredible moment because this is a vote of confidence for our growers in BC, and it allows just another piece of infrastructure to make sure that our BC fruit tree industry remains strong.
The reopening of the new plant also means more jobs for the town of Oliver. The plant rehired 30 people who previously worked under the co-op. Tiffany Goodwin, CBC News, Penticton.
It's now 12:34. Well, the COP summit begins today in Belém, Brazil. It is the summit's 30th year, and it's now 10 years after the Paris Accord that had countries commit to limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. The political landscape has changed with the Trump administration pulling out of the accord. CBC News international climate correspondent Susan Ormiston is in Belém for the summit, and she spoke to CBC this morning about what the summit is trying to accomplish this year.
It's trying to come up with some action plans instead of making yet more pledges. That is the theme of this conference. the delegates here very aware that this is a very politically difficult time for climate change, with a climate denier in the White House, amongst other economic pressures and attention on wars. So at the official opening of COP30 this morning, we heard from the Brazilian president talking about misinformation about climate change and saying that it's time to confront it head on.
We're taking your calls on this. Are climate initiatives falling by the wayside? And how can they become a political priority? You can call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. That's 604-669-3733. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca, or you can leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Kathryn Harrison is a UBC political scientist who studies environmental, climate, and energy policy. Kathryn, thanks for joining us. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
How do you see the political backdrop against which this COP30 summit is taking place?
It is definitely a challenging time. Canada is not exceptional in that a couple of things have sort of knocked climate change off the top of the public's agenda. First, there was COVID. Then there was the war in Ukraine that drove up inflation and affordability concerns. And now we've got U.S. tariffs, not just in Canada, but globally, that are leading people to focus on the economy. So the climate, which was in the top 2 or 3 of top of mind issues for Canadians in 2019, is down towards the bottom of the top 10. But I think it's important that voters' inattention doesn't mean that they don't care about climate change. A significant majority of Canadians still believe that climate change is caused by human activity. We are witnessing and experiencing the impacts of climate change, and there's still support for climate policies to reduce our emissions, although certainly less support for those that it would increase household costs.
You mentioned that Canada is not exceptional in that matter. The Carney Liberal government just delivered its budget last week. Where do you see Canada falling when it comes to how high climate change is on the list of priorities?
It is, I think it's still in the top 10, but it's towards the bottom. And I think what we are seeing in the most recent budget is the one thing that Canada is exceptional in is, or at least in a small group, is that we are a major fossil fuel producer for export. And that always creates this temptation, especially when there are short-term economic concerns, to make money by shipping out more fossil fuels, and then to say, well, that's going to help us reduce our own emissions. And I think we see that in the most recent budget. There is emphasis on some important climate policies, tighter methane regulations, strengthening the industrial carbon pricing framework, and at the same time, a pretty enthusiastic embrace of LNG, both at the federal level and in British Columbia.
Mm-hmm. And those methane regulations as well, and the carbon market, those are, I guess, those would be conditions that could lead to the removal of the cap on emissions on the oil and gas industry, right?
Yes. My read of the budget is that the federal government is willing to remove that cap if they can make up the emissions reductions that would have been achieved by it through other means, in particular methane regs, and the strengthening of the industrial emissions system, and also increasing the price in the industrial carbon pricing system over time.
Okay. My guest, Kathryn Harrison, UBC political scientist who studies environment and climate and environmental policy. Taking your calls. As the COP30 summit begins today in Brazil, we're asking you, have climate initiatives fallen by the wayside? Are you concerned about that? And how can climate become a political priority? You can call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or dial 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 is our other number. bctoday@cbc.ca is our email address. Chris is waiting on the line in Victoria. Hi, Chris. Welcome.
Hi, thanks very much. How are you today?
I am just fine. Yeah, your thoughts on the COP Climate Summit and what the landscape is like right now when it comes to climate initiatives?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm pretty disappointed about it. You know, I feel like climate initiatives have fallen by the wayside, especially here in Canada and even more so down in the U.S. and in North America in general. It's hugely concerning to me. I'm really disappointed to see how little priority is being given in Canada and in general with global leaders to giving this issue the priority it deserves. You know, countries make pledges and they're not being actioned. And I feel like we're so late to the game in taking action already that unless we start to give this issue top priority and start making huge changes to move away from fossil fuels and increase our move towards renewable resources, we're going to be in a real heap of trouble that no amount of economic resilience is going to fix. And, you know, I just feel like in Canada, we should be global leaders in this area. And I don't even feel like we're close. You know, I'm really interested to see what happens with these nation building projects later in November here to see whether or not there are pipelines that are going to be pushed forward for that, especially with regards to BC and the oil tanker ban and things like that. But I'm not cautiously optimistic. I am very fearful for the future and just would really like to see some positive changes in our country and globally in this area.
Chris, thank you very much for the call from Victoria. Nick is up next now in Vancouver. Are you concerned that climate initiatives are falling by the wayside, Nick?
I am, yes. I believe that climate initiatives have fallen by the wayside, and I think among many reasons, one of the main reasons for this is because the economy's tight and because people are concerned about money, and so there's less mental room for concern about global warming. And so I think that any government or any political party that wants to make global warming a relevant issue, as they well should, needs to reframe it in an economic context, because the worse global warming gets and the worse climate change gets, the more it's going to impact the economy and impact everyone's livelihood. And I think that the government really needs to focus on that side of things.
Nick, thank you very much for the call. I'm really interested in that, your note or your comment about the mental room among the public when they are worried about a tight economy. And so Nick is talking there, Kathryn, about reframing the environment as an economic issue. What do you think of that? How do you put this back on the agenda for voters who have been concerned about affordability?
I think there are a couple of important ways. One of them is that we unfortunately are seeing both the federal and provincial governments dialing back or eliminating household incentives for things like purchasing EVs or heat pumps. And I think it's important to include those, because one of the challenges is that people think, well, this must be caused by someone else. How can you blame me? And so having an inclusive and just transition, supporting the changes that need to happen through our progressive tax system, I think is one way to do that. Another thing is that the people who are paying attention and who are getting the briefings are the politicians. And one of the challenges they're facing is, the public saying improve the economy, address affordability, but we are also seeing some pretty rapid changes happening globally, especially with low-cost Chinese solar panels and electric vehicles. So developing countries are starting to really rapidly embrace renewable electricity generation. It's expected to be twice the investments this year compared to fossil fuels globally, and uptake of EVs, not just in places like Norway, but in places like Nepal and Ethiopia. And that raises really big questions for Canada of what direction is the global economy going to go. And if we want to make investments today to keep our economy competitive over the long term, where's the puck going? And should we be investing in fossil fuels or other sectors?
You know, when you talk about EVs, we have seen governments, Canada, holding back on those electric vehicle sales mandates, then is that going the wrong way?
It is, absolutely. They have eliminated the incentives for households, especially middle and lower income households. The wealthy folks don't need support in that. The incentives, and also the federal government is reviewing its ZEV mandate and has indicated it will not enforce the 2026 one. BC is also reviewing. I think there is room for some tweaks. The kinds of things would include allowing credits for long-range plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that most people would be running, electric all the time. But I still think it is justified and doable to stick to that 2035 mandate to be 100% of passenger vehicle sales electric.
Okay. It sounds like you're saying there are ways for the government to introduce policies that actually incentivize people to make the change in their own lives.
Yes, both through subsidies to lower income households, but also the way that electric vehicle mandate is designed, it incentivizes the manufacturers of those vehicles to price the electric vehicles so that they can sell enough of them. And that could create cross-subsidization from the luxury gas guzzling vehicles to incentivize uptake of electric vehicles. And that is in the hands of the manufacturers, although they tend not to emphasize it.
Let's take some calls now. We're asking you, are climate initiatives falling by the wayside? And how can climate become a political priority? This as the COP30 summit begins in Brazil today. Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. My guest is UBC political scientist Kathryn Harrison. Robert is our next caller now in Vancouver. Hi, Robert. Your thoughts on climate initiatives?
Yes, thanks for taking my call, Michelle. So I just have one comment to make on the whole situation, and I'll try and keep it short. I read a book a couple of years ago called The Petroleum Papers by Canadian environmental writer Jeff Dembicki, who actually grew up around the tar sands. So it's the story of the development of the tar sands and how big oil manipulated the Canadian government, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But the point I want to make is in the book, in the start of the book, near the beginning, he cites that in 1958, Edward Teller, the co-developer of the fusion bomb, spoke at the 1958 meeting of the American Petroleum Institute, Association, whatever. And this is what he said. It's not verbatim, but he said basically this: if you continue on this path, you will destroy the climate and in the end, destroy the world. Now, this guy was the co-developer of the fusion bomb, and he's somewhat more intelligent than me or your average person, I would have to say. And, on top of that, that's 75 years ago now, something like that. The oceans have been absorbing massive amounts of heat for a long time, and they can't absorb any more now. And so my whole attitude about this, unfortunately, is there's no way to stop this. We're way past the point of no return. I really feel that we've passed many tipping points too, and so.
We've heard that, haven't we? Yeah. Robert, thank you very much. Last year, the World Meteorological Organization did confirm 2024 as the warmest year on record. Kathryn, this is a question you must get. How many? Is it too late? Essentially, is his point.
I reinforce everything Robert said about the role that climate change deniers have played in leading regular folks, those of us who are not climate scientists, to doubt the very strong consensus of the scientific community that all of the warming we are seeing is caused by human activities. That said, where I disagree with Robert, and I expect he might have overstated his own position, is that we are not past the point of no return. In fact, the fact that the warming we are seeing is caused by human activity means that it's up to humans whether we're going to reduce our emissions. The planet's going to keep warming until we get to net zero. How quickly we get to net zero will determine how bad it gets. And although it does look like we are about to surpass the 1.5 C limit, and that will be costly for our economies and human lives. Every fraction of a degree that we can avoid is going to save a lot of lives and a lot of suffering. So it's not too late, and it's up to us.
Robert, thank you for the call. Mina is joining us now. Mina Lee from Salt Spring Island. I know you email us a lot, so thanks for calling in this time, Mina Lee.
Hi. I'm a senior, 80 years old, and I was arrested at Burnaby Mountain for the pipeline. And what I want to tell you today is, like, I'm angry. I'm angry all the time, every day, for years now. I'm just surrounded. We're all surrounded with traffic everywhere. And nobody, even the environmentalists don't talk about the traffic, how bad it is. So now we're talking about EVs. Well, that's not going to solve the traffic problem. You know, when they built the Canada line, they should have put it all the way out to the ferries. There's just so much we could have done, and we still need to.
More public transit then.
We need not only transit, there's amazing things. Other countries are getting rid of traffic. In Paris, there's no more traffic in there. Downtown, and you know, our trains were great. We took them all the time before the car companies lobbied to get rid of the trains and get their vehicles everywhere. And each one of you is surrounded by traffic everywhere, every day, correct?
Yeah, I can't disagree with that. Absolutely. Mina Lee, thank you very much for the call. And we have talked about, the role of electric vehicles, but transportation being such a huge contributor to emissions, Kathryn. What can be done to actually reduce the number of vehicles on the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think I do hear environmentalists talk a lot about alternatives to electric vehicles, but I think we need both to electrify our transportation, including the heavier vehicles that are delivering the food and other goods to us, and at the same time invest in transit and active transportation. I mean, I'm lucky to live in a place where I can ride an e-bike most of the time. And one of the things I've learned about that, even though I'm 66 years old and riding up the hill to UBC most days, is that it makes me happier. I get exercise, I feel better, and I have a lower carbon footprint. So I think we need to remind ourselves that many of the things that we can do will also be good for us in other ways, reducing air pollution, improving our health, and just making us happier people.
I can see you smiling as you talk about going on your bike there. Ian is next now in Victoria. Hi, Ian.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Sure thing.
This is first off, I constantly hear petroleum referred to as fossil fuel. And while that's true, it's materials that it's really all about. And you think about all the materials that we have. The image I like to use is, well, you can buy an electric vehicle, but it's made of plastic. And petroleum-based materials are everywhere. And I don't see them getting away from it. And environmentalists and climate activists saying get a plastic electric vehicle and feeling good about it is, well, I don't know, you really got to think that through a little bit more. And I don't know that there's a whole lot that government can do. Here in Victoria, we had, John Horgan and the protesters against the pipeline, and yet simultaneously we're waving in the cruise ships, which have a carbon footprint the size of Godzilla wearing snowshoes. Hardly hear anything about that.
Okay.
So it's individual things. I mean, we can turn to the government to pass policy, but the airports are crowded. For people that are taking cruise ship vacations, they're buying products from overseas that come on cargo vessels fueled by bunk fuel. I mean, we just don't seem to be getting away from it. And the platitude or the idea of getting electric vehicles in any way going to improve things, it's not thinking it through.
Ian, thank you very much for the call. So other things that are contributing as well. Yeah, people flying, going on those cruise trips, as you mentioned too. Let me just wrap up here in my last couple of minutes with you, Kathryn. One of our callers talked about the nation-building projects, what the federal government refers to or considers nation-building projects. One of them in the first batch was that LNG Canada expansion at Kitimat. Our caller referred to the possibility of a pipeline from Alberta to the coast, although the BC government here has reiterated its support, along with First Nations on the coast, their support for a ban on tankers off the north coast. What will you be watching for there as Canada looks for these kinds of projects to, again, try and promote economic resilience?
Yeah, I have a lot of concerns about LNG as our sort of economic strategy. LNG Canada Phase 2 could add 6-7 million tons to British Columbia alone, and the whole host of LNG projects could easily double that, depending on pipeline compressors and production. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the electricity consumption and whether that will be available for decarbonization of transportation and buildings and other industrial sectors. And I'm concerned about the fairness. Who's going to pay for it? We are starting to see a return of new fossil fuel subsidies in the form of subsidies for LNG, but potentially what I'm also looking at is what will be the electricity rates? Will these LNG terminals pay the full costs of their own electricity consumption? Or will those be cross-subsidized by household consumers or by taxpayers at large?
Kathryn Harrison, it is always good to speak with you. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We'll watch to see what does come out of COP30 this time around.
You're very welcome, Michelle.
That's Kathryn Harrison, UBC political science professor who studies environmental, climate, and energy policy. A couple of emails here as well. Scott writes, at the COP climate meeting, countries are talking about how to stop the Earth from getting hotter. Most of the heat comes from burning fuels that waste energy and trap sunlight as extra warmth. Scientists call that radiative forcing. The fix is easy to picture. Plug everything into clean electricity, cars, heaters, and factories, and skip wasteful fuels like hydrogen made from gas. And if we swap cows for plant or lab-grown foods, we cut methane too. That is how we stop warming. And Randy writes as well, COP30 is at best an illusion meant to make us feel like attention is being paid and actions are and will be taken, but more to the reality of the overhyped spectacle, it is a farce. That a great opportunity exists is undeniable. Thank you very much for your emails. bctoday@cbc.ca is our address.